It felt as if I was on the edge of this volcano.
Former 700 Club host Sheila Walsh.
And I didn't know what to do.
Her storm inside.
I asked God, I said, if there's 1 ounce of mercy left in your heart for me, please take me home tonight.
And journey to become a true woman of faith.
What a ray of hope into the darkest night of your life.
On today's 700 Club.
Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. We've got some great things for you today. But I want to tell you this good news from down there in Charleston. Emmanuel AME Church met Sunday for the first time since that massacre. And with the world watching, it sent the message that love and forgiveness conquer hate.
At an emotional service, the church mourned, prayed, and honored the lives of the members they loved so dearly. Ephraim Graham has a look at the healing that's beginning to take shape.
Sunday worship returned to this Charleston crime scene 4 days after a gunman killed 9 people during Bible study at Mother Emmanuel AME. Longtime members prayed for this day, but it's not easy.
These people I knew well. These are fine people. These are all fine people. We all 4 ministers that we lost in this church, and they're great people. They are absolutely great people. I will never forget about this day.
Tears give way to worship inside the sanctuary, packed with visitors, parishioners, and politicians.
My uncle went to Emmanuel for more than 30 years before his death. So for me, it's a fairly personal experience. I'd say really personal experience and loss.
Tim Scott is the first African-American elected to the Senate from South Carolina and a personal friend of Clemente Pinckney, Emmanuel's pastor and a state senator, killed in the massacre.
I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat, but you would not be able to tell there was a difference because when we were together, we weren't talking politics. We weren't talking philosophical dispositions from a political perspective. We talked about his family. We talked about his little girls. We talked about the power of hope, the power of faith, the power of love.
I saw Pastor Clemente's love firsthand 5 years ago at this great gathering of men on a mission to help children in need.
Even those of us who may come from homes where there are no fathers, I think that there are always father figures.
Clemente became that figure for Kyle Green.
It doesn't matter that you're from Ridgeland, this small town.
Who grew up in the same hometown with an absent father and a mother on drugs.
How would you describe the relationship between you and Clemente?
He saw something in me that I didn't see in my own self, and that was my potential to be great. And I think unknowingly to me, he poured into it. And so I'm gonna miss that more than anything, his ability to pour into my potential to be great.
A pastor's love is also palpable here outside the church, days after the hate-driven crime.
You feel it in the spontaneous worship that erupts on the street.
It's really moving. You just look around and you see the outpouring of love and support from the community.
Zach and his college buddies came from Manhattan. Pastor Dimas Salaberios traveled from the Bronx.
It helps the healing process when white, black, Asian, Latino begin to come together and say, you know what, we're here to say we're not a part of Dylan's foolishness. We're here to say that we're standing with the church and with their families and those that are hurt.
Pastor Dimas joined 8 ministers from New York and New Jersey, praying with victims' family members.
Let's live out John 13:35, where God said, you know, that the world will know us and know that we're his disciples by our love one towards another.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Charleston, South Carolina.
Well, that's a great witness for the entire nation. There's something in effect that's been called the Affordable Care Act. It's known as Obamacare. Within days now, even as we speak, and shortly thereafter, the Supreme Court is going to bring down a ruling as to whether or not the federal subsidies that have been given to people under that CARE Act actually violate the Act as it is written. Jonathan Gruber, who wrote the Act, said indefinitely there were state exchanges, and that's what it was intended to be. We'll see what happens. But the Wall Street Journal is saying, look, if this thing continues as it's currently going, there's going to be an oligopoly that will be all of the 4 or 5 major health providers are going to be merged together. And so we'll have single payer whether we like it or not, and that will be terrible for the American consumer. Well, John Jessup has more on this story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Thanks, Pat. President Obama's health care law faces a critical ruling at the Supreme Court, and no matter what the outcome, Americans can expect to see more of an impact from Obamacare. Here's George Thomas with the details.
The case before the 9 justices focuses on the legality of subsidies. Challengers want the court to determine whether President Obama's health care law authorizes tax subsidies for millions of Americans. If the court agrees with the opponents, some 6 million people could lose their tax credits to buy health insurance.
If the court were to rule that the administration's interpretation was wrong, then there are 34 states where people would no longer be able to get these tax credits for buying coverage on the exchange.
That means the cost of health insurance could rise again, and depending on the state you live in, premiums could jump by hundreds of dollars per month. Some Republicans say they have legislation to help those who could lose health coverage in case the Supreme Court rules against the administration. Others say if the court strikes down the subsidy, then it's time to repeal Obamacare completely. The Congressional Budget Office says that would actually grow the economy by 0.7% per year. But if Obamacare continues, the Wall Street Journal warns of major consequences for the healthcare industry, including the potential creation of one massive health system one day run by the government. In an editorial titled Obamacare's Oligopoly Wave, the paper says America's 5 largest health insurers are thinking about consolidating into one monster conglomerate, creating oligopolies with the predictable results of higher costs, lower quality, and less innovation.
This is just one more example of a law that has all sorts of unintended consequences and adverse effects for all sorts of people.
The court is expected to hand down its decision on Obamacare by month's end. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. And Pat, any predictions on how the court will rule?
I don't have a clue. I really don't. I think if they got any sense, they'll strike it down, because if they follow the language of the law, it's clear, and the person who was the architect of it said clearly that's what he intended. So they'd have to go against established precedent to uphold that thing. But that's what happens when socialists get their hands on the government and try to impose these crazy schemes. That law was a monstrosity. It should never have passed. It was strictly a Democrat Party operation. There wasn't one Republican who voted for it. And the Speaker of the House said, we've got to pass it to see what's in it. And that's that famous statement out by Nancy Pelosi. They didn't know what was in the law. And they're still trying to find out. It was a huge monstrosity that took about 1/6 of the entire economy of this nation and tried to jam it into a new model, and it's led to chaos and confusion and enormous costs. So the best thing that would happen if the Supreme Court would rule that indeed those state mandates are legal and that what was being done by federal subsidies is not in the law, and then if Congress would go back, strike down the Obamacare and rewrite the thing would make some sense. It's got to be done. Well, there's another ruling that I think is rather strange that came out of Iowa. And Iowa's the heartland, but you'd never know it from this decision. John?
That's right, Pat. Iowa's Supreme Court has reinstated a controversial abortion practice. It allows doctors to give abortion-inducing pills through a video conferencing system without meeting the patient in person. In 2013, the Iowa Board of Medicine ruled doctors must be in the same room with a patient before dispensing the pills. The board cited safety concerns over a required physical examination. Pro-life advocates tell CBN News the practice is dangerous for women, but Iowa's justices unanimously agreed with Planned Parenthood that having a doctor in the room is too much trouble. Iowa is one of 2 states that allows telemed abortions. A United Nations report on last summer's war in Gaza says both Israel and the Palestinians may have committed war crimes. The report says the UN Commission gathered substantial information pointing to serious violations of international human rights law by both sides. Israel launched its offensive last summer in response to heavy rocket fire from Hamas aimed at Israeli civilians. Israel warned Palestinians to evacuate before launching their airstrikes, but they point out Hamas used civilians as human shields. A similar report following the 2008-2009 Gaza war was harshly critical of both Israel and Hamas. Well, a number of potential presidential hopefuls made their pitch to an influential evangelical audience this weekend. As David Brody reports, they took their message to the Faith and Freedom Coalition's Road to Majority conference right here in Washington, D.C.
The goal of this weekend's strategy session, win back the White House and keep the majority. With more than 1 million members, the Faith and Freedom Coalition knows it will need more evangelical soldiers to join the fight. Despite high turnout in the past, CEO Ralph Reed says the GOP must do its part too.
We're not the Republican Party at prayer. We're not a super PAC for a future nominee. That's not us. We're a faith-based organization that registers, mobilizes, and turns out Christian voters. And we do our job, and we do it very well, thank you very much. What we cannot do is we can't do the job of the candidate.
And more than a dozen potential candidates came here hammering issues near and dear to their audience. Rand Paul talked to CBN News about balancing liberty and virtue.
Just being free is not enough, and in fact, if you are free and you have all of your liberty, if you have no structure to your life, if you have no tradition, if you have no faith to sort of be the underpinnings of society, that it really may not work.
Ted Cruz also made a prediction.
I believe 2016 will be the religious liberty election. In fact, just this week, I think the EPA has named religious liberty an endangered species.
The key for these speakers is to make a good impression that will stay with voters.
They've all given good speeches. I've heard Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, Ben Carson.
There are so many presidential candidates out there, it really is hard to keep track. But there is one person that showed up here that isn't a presidential candidate just yet, but he's getting ready and he's attracting a lot of buzz. It's Ohio Governor John Kasich. He brings a strong resume, a popular governor with a successful record from a key swing state who likes talking about his Christian faith. What's the calling card? What is it about you that could potentially differentiate
Well, it's
yourself?
experience and record. I mean, amateur hour is over. It's not about tell me, it's about show me. And I think it's time that we're able to support somebody that has a solid record of accomplishment, because that's what we need in America. No more on-the-job training.
Kasich surely won't be the last to jump in. 3 governors, Chris Christie, Scott Walker, and Bobby Jindal, are set to make moves in the next few weeks. It will then be up to primary voters to trim this standing room only field into one standout candidate that they believe can put the GOP on the road to success. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, David. Pat, a pretty big crowd there this weekend.
Well, I said at the beginning of this thing that the dream ticket would be Jeb Bush for president and John Kasich as vice president. But Kasich was head of the House Budget Committee. He's expert on budget matters, and he's been a superb governor of one of the biggest states in the nation, and one that has had Democrat majorities along the way. And he's gotten together with the unions. He's gotten together with Democrats and Republicans. And he's done is what he said, amateur hour is over. We've got amateur hour in the White House right now. That's what happens when you put in somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So without question, a governor is better qualified to run this gigantic enterprise called the United States government than somebody who comes out of the legislative branch. There is no question about it, and there are many governors right now who are running. So you've got the former governor of Texas, and you've got the former governor of Florida, and now you have the sitting governor of Ohio, you have the governor of Wisconsin, and you have the governor of New Jersey. So we have a number of governors as well as some very distinguished senators. So
with his history and his success record, why would you not flip that and have Kasich run for president with Jeb as his vice president?
He would be a very good first, I don't know whether he'll have the money. I mean, Jeb will have the money and the momentum going in. But either one of them would make a superb president. They really would. But hey, it's too early to tell. They're still out there fighting. But I think Kasich has the common touch. He speaks to the blue-collar workers of Ohio and the nation. And, there's no way you're going to pin what they did with Mitt Romney, that he's some out-of-touch plutocrat. He's just not. He's just,
He's got a certain toughness that I think appeals to people, too.
He's a good guy. And his mother used to watch the 700 Club. That's what's so important about him.
What other news do we need?
What else would you possibly need as a candidate? All right.
Well, coming up, a surprising reaction from the family members of men killed by ISIS.
When we found out they had been killed for being Christian, we were very comforted because these were God's children and He took them.
Hear their stories and see how believers around the world are rallying to their cause. That's next.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you read your Bible and you read the book of Revelation, you'll come upon a thing in the last days of a multitude of people, the souls of those who were beheaded for their witness to Jesus. And you read that and you say, well, sometime when the Antichrist shows up, maybe that's what's going to happen, but it isn't going to happen in my lifetime, so I'm not going to worry about it. But it seems so far removed from the kind of life that we live, the souls of those who were beheaded for their witness to Jesus. Well, it's happening now. That bunch of crazies is coming up out of the Middle East called the Islamic State in Syria or the Islamic State in the Levant, ISIS or ISIL, whichever name you want to give them. These people think that in the Quran, which it does, it speaks of beheading the infidels. And who are the infidels? The Christians. And so they line up Christians in orange jumpsuits, large numbers of them, and then one by one they take a knife and cut their heads off. It is ghastly, it is horrible, and I might say it's turning thousands of people against ISIS. People are repulsed by this kind of slaughter, but it's in the Bible. And these people are prepared, and people have to get prepared. All right, if they cut off my head, I will be with Jesus, and my spirit will go on. Well, what would you do if Islamic radicals kidnapped one of your loved ones and then chopped that person's head off on television? Would you be mad, angry, forgiving? Well, we found a group of Egyptian Christians who responded very differently than what you would think. And Gary Lane reported they were happy that their family members stood firm in their belief in Jesus Christ.
I was very proud that my husband stood firm in his faith and that he didn't deny Jesus.
That surprising reaction is happening 150 miles south of Cairo, in the village of El Aour. Residents there honor the sacrifice of 21 Egyptians brutally murdered last February by ISIS. Their pictures are prominently displayed in the sanctuary of Virgin Mary Church. 13 attended this church. The martyrs left behind family members, like 23-year-old Mariam Farhat. She became a widow when the militants beheaded her husband Malik Ibrahim in Libya. She first learned of his murder when she saw this now infamous video on local television.
We were very sad for the first 2 days, but we hadn't seen the video. When we saw them in the video calling to Jesus, we were very comforted.
And that's why Miriam and other families say they are now joyful, not sad. Babawi Alham's brother Samuel was among those killed.
We were always praying that God would make them steadfast in their faith. We were very happy with what they said on the video, Jesus Christ, have mercy on us. When we found out they had been killed for being Christian, we were very comforted because these were God's children and He took them.
Although Samuel's wife and children now live without a husband and father, his family told CBN News their faith is stronger. They forgive the jihadists and even pray for ISIS.
I pray for them that God may open their heart and they may know the truth and know that what they do is wrong and then do the right thing. Jesus told us to forgive every sin, and we forgive them, and we hope that they can come to know Jesus.
Christians here in Egypt are encouraged to know they're not alone. Back in the United States, there's a growing movement among Christians there to demonstrate unity and solidarity with those who are suffering for Christ in the Middle East.
What we thought was, how could we identify and stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Christ who are being brutalized around the world for their Christian faith? What tangible thing could we do? What practical thing could we do?
Immediately, orange jumpsuits came to mind. Mahoney and others launched the #Orange Jumpsuit campaign. The movement has expanded to orange scarves, sweaters, and ribbons.
It's to remind our brothers and sisters that we love them and we're standing with them, and to remind decision makers here in America and across the globe, the free nations of the world, we cannot be silent on this issue.
Mahoney says the response has been amazing. Non-Christians have joined in as well.
A Jewish rabbi to stand in solidarity with persecuted Christians is dyeing his beard orange, which I think is incredible, and I can't wait to see that.
Miriam was encouraged after she viewed cell phone photos of Americans wearing orange.
May the Lord make their love grow and grow. We are very happy with their love. We don't deserve their love.
Mahoney says every 5 minutes around the world a Christian is killed for his faith.
People don't understand the kind of barbarism and brutality they are going through. And you know, when I visit persecuted Christians in the Middle East, there's one thing they always ask. It doesn't matter if it's Iraq, Syria, wherever it might be, it's this: please remember us.
And wearing orange on the job or at church helps people remember them.
I think people need to understand that if we do not act quickly, the public expression of Christianity may be extinguished in the Middle East. As Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner, says, we must always take sides. Silence only helps the oppressor, never the oppressed.
Miriam also has a message for others who have suffered or still face danger from ISIS.
Don't be sad or cry. God will support us all. He will fulfill his promise that he is the father of the orphans and the widows.
Gary Lane, CBN News, Cairo, Egypt.
Well, if that doesn't touch your heart, ladies and gentlemen, we must pray for those people. We must do something. And in relation to the United States government, we must do something to eliminate this hideous evil that is spreading like cancer throughout the Middle East. This idea of, well, I want to degrade them, I mean, come on, let's go after them and make an effort. We have to do this as a nation. We cannot allow every vestige of Christianity in the Middle East to be extinguished by these vicious people. ISIS is just a small group. It isn't big, it isn't powerful, it isn't some mighty army. It's a tiny little ragtag bunch of terrorists who believe fervently in the Quran and in the Islamic faith. That's where they get it. It isn't some aberrant strain. It is right straight out of the Quran. Read it. It's in there about beheading your enemies. It's there. Lifting their heads and striking their necks. It's in there. But people are thinking, oh no, well, you'd be speak ill of Islam, that there would be something not in comporting with political correctness. Well, I'm not politically correct, but I am correct in saying that we've got to eliminate an evil like this, and we've got to stand for the oppressed. Terry?
Well, coming up, the night Sheila Walsh almost had a nervous breakdown.
I stopped off at Virginia Beach, and I took my shoes off, and I walked to the edge of the water. And honestly, all I wanted to do was to keep on walking and just be done.
Find out what stopped her. That's next.
That's great. For 5 years, a young Scottish-born singer named Sheila Walsh sat next to me as the co-host of the 700 Club. Sheila's also an author, a speaker, an evangelist, and woman of faith. And yet at the pinnacle of her career, Sheila found herself feeling hopeless and alone. And at one point, she actually wanted to die.
I was very much a daddy's girl. My father was tall and funny and had an amazing singing voice. You could hardly get a thread between us. I just thought my father was the most amazing man on the earth. We went to bed one night and everything was normal and wonderful, and by the next morning, life would never be the same again. During the night, my father had a massive brain aneurysm and was taken off to intensive care. After a few weeks, my dad actually came home. He was paralyzed down the left side. He never regained any words. He could only make sounds. Sometimes when there's acute brain injury, the person instinctively hits out at the one person they believe will still love them no matter what. But you don't understand that when you're 5 years old. The only one my father took his anger out on was me. He would spit in my face or pull lumps of my hair out. And as a child, I just thought, well, what am I doing wrong? Obviously, Dad's trying to tell me something and I'm not understanding. I'm making him mad. I have to try harder. One night, I was sitting by the fire playing with Heidi, my little dog, and I suddenly heard her growl. And I turned, and in that moment, I saw that my father was behind me with his cane about to bring it down on my skull. I don't know whether I pulled it or pushed, but he fell and hit the ground hard and just lay there roaring like an animal. It took 4 or 5 men to carry my dad out of the house that day, and he was taken to what was called our local asylum. My father escaped, and they looked for him through the night and found him just as the sun was breaking the next morning. He was dead in the river, caught in the salmon nets. He'd taken his own life. My mom came home with a black dress on and a black hat and took all the photographs of my father off the wall, put them in a suitcase, put it under her bed, and we never talked about him again. All I knew was that I had done something to make my father hate me, or he had seen something in me that he despised. I remember someone saying to me once, "Sheila, you're just like your dad." And I think what they honestly meant was, you sing like your dad, you tell appallingly bad jokes like your father. But what I heard was, there's a crack in your soul like your father. And one of these days, no matter how fast you run, it's going to catch up with you. And I spent the next many, many years trying to make sure that whatever it was my father saw, no one else would ever see. I found the perfect hiding place, Christian ministry. I mean, who's going to come up to me and say, put that Bible down or we're going to have an intervention? Outwardly, it looked like, God had just really put his hand of favor on my life. But inside, I was still the same scared little girl. It felt as if I was on the edge of this volcano and this distant rumble was getting louder and louder every day, and I didn't know what to do. I kept my life very noisy. I would get up in the morning and put on the television. I'd get into the car, I'd turn on the radio. But the disquiet, the rumbling, the smoke just kept getting more intense. I remember one day going to the ATM machine and I couldn't remember the 4 digits of my PIN number. It was my birthday and I couldn't remember what it was. And another day, I was interviewing a guest and I asked her my first question. And before she answered, she said, Sheila, you sit here every day talking to us and asking us how we're doing. How are you doing? I wasn't expecting it, and I didn't have time to pull my guard up. And that morning, I did what I vowed I would never do. I started crying on television. And I thought, you have to face it, Sheila. It's over. I asked God, I said, if there's 1 ounce of mercy left in your heart for me, please take me home tonight, because I can't do this. It's too hard. I felt like in the Christian world that my circle could cope with a dead Sheila Walsh far more than a hospitalized in a mental hospital Sheila Walsh. I remember getting the car by myself and driving. I stopped off at Virginia Beach and I took my shoes off and I walked to the edge of the water. I walked till I was almost knee deep And honestly, all I wanted to do was to keep on walking and just be done. And I think the only thing that stopped me was the thought of my mother receiving another phone call that someone she loved had disappeared under the water. I just couldn't do that to her. But I have to tell you, I wanted to. I wanted to just follow in my father's footsteps in the most terrible way. I'll never forget the day. I sat in the parking lot outside the hospital, and I remember sobbing on the steering wheel and saying, Lord, how did I get here? How can you spend your whole life trying to get it right and end up in a place that says that everything's terribly wrong? It's a very strange experience being admitted as a patient to a psych hospital. The nurse went through all my stuff in my suitcase. She took away my belt, my hose, my hairdryer, my makeup. And they'd take you to a little room, single bed, chair, no locks. And I felt as if I'd gone to hell. And I sat in the corner with my head on my knees, and I could hear someone check on me every 15 minutes, but I never looked up. But at 3 o'clock, the person came into the room and walked till they were right in front of me. So I looked up. He had something in his hands, and he gave it to me. And it was a little stuffed animal. It was a little lamb. And he put it in my hands, and then he turned to leave. And when he got to the door, he stopped and turned round, and he said, Sheila, the shepherd knows where to find you. I was there for a month. I never saw him again. But what a ray of hope into the darkest night of your life. The shepherd knows where to find you. My mom was a farm accountant, and so I got to see the spring lambs. I would watch little lambs being born, and it's the most beautiful sight, but every now and again, a ewe will give birth to a lamb and immediately reject it, and there's nothing the shepherd can do. And if the shepherd doesn't intervene, then that lamb will die, not of hunger, but of a broken spirit. They call them bummer lambs. So the shepherd will take that lamb into his home, and he'll care for it, feed it with a bottle, and once the lamb is strong enough, he'll put it back with the flock. But in the morning when he comes out and he calls, sheep, 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 the very first ones to run to him are the bummer lambs because they know his voice. And I will be a bummer lamb until the day I die. Every morning when I wake up, some mornings I look in the mirror and I think, oh, bless your heart. And other mornings, you know, it's dimmer and I feel better about life. But every single morning, I use the Psalm 143, verse 8, which says this, let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I have placed my trust in you. Show me the way I should go, for to you I entrust my life. And I remember I'm Sheila Walsh, daughter of the King of Kings.
What a beautiful story of redemption and hope. I remember those dark nights that Sheila went through. We tried to do what we could to help her along the way, and I think we did. We were there for her, but nevertheless, depression, folks, is a very real thing. And people who suffer from depression, it isn't something you sort of snap out of it. It has psychological causes. It is buried deep in the subconscious. It also has physiological causes. And it is very real, and it can be life-threatening. And in Sheila's case, it was almost suicidal. And there are many people who think that way, you know, just, God, I can't stand it any longer. But I tell you, there is an answer, and the answer is in the Lord. But also, I think in a case like this, that there are professional help, there is medication, there are other things to help people with depression. And I just believe that God wants to look after you. But the nice thing, the shepherd knows where his sheep are. And he loves you wherever you are and whatever you're going through. He understands, and he wants to be there for you. So God bless you, and, you know, call upon him, and he will answer you. I want to give you something if you'd like. It's something called Depression. It's a small book. Little booklet. I'll give you this if you like, if you've got this problem. That's just one thing about it, but you're not alone, and we're there for you and others as well. Depression. It's keys to powerful living. We'll give this to you. Terry, what's next?
Well, still ahead, do you feel as if you're being held back? One author has a way for you to break free. That's coming up next.
Welcome back to Washington for this CBN News Break. The grandson of Billy Graham has stepped down as pastor of a megachurch in Florida. Tullian Tavigian had taken over at Coral Ridge Presbyterian after the passing of renowned pastor D. James Kennedy. But in a statement to the Washington Post, Tavigian explains why he's now leaving. He says he had separated from his wife after finding out she was having an affair. And he admits he then also became involved in what he calls an inappropriate relationship. He says, "Both my wife and I are heartbroken over our actions, and we ask you to pray for us and our family that God would give us the grace we need to weather this heart-wrenching storm." Well, CBN's Orphans Promise is helping feed children in Haiti. Teaming up with a local church, Orphans Promise built a kitchen and dining room to feed 1,200 kids 5 times a week. Staff, partners, and volunteers recently dedicated the new kitchen with a huge celebration. Thanks to the contributions of partners from around the world, Orphans Promise is able to feed 6,000 meals a week and more than 300,000 meals over the course of a year. And we call that good news. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. Pat and Terry will be back right after this.
Well, chances are you know someone with a victim mentality. They go around blaming others for their lot in life. Well, here's the problem. That woe is me attitude isn't just causing other people to feel sorry for them. It's also robbing them of their God-given promise. Take a look.
Ken Harrison is a veteran of the LA Police Department and a successful businessman. He says many people are held back in life by what he calls a victim mentality. Instead of making hard choices, they make excuses. In his book, Victors and Victims, Harrison tells how to identify your core values, how to build powerful relationships, and how to be happy as you fulfill your goals and dreams.
Well, Ken Harrison is here with us now. And Ken, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thanks.
Your book is amazing, Victors and Victims. Boy, I poured through this, and of course, as you read a book like this, you think of all the people you know who fall into the two categories. Right. But for you, you're a former police officer, and so you saw people who were really struggling, and sometimes at their worst, I'm sure many of them, victim mentalities.
Yeah, you know, we were back in South Central Los Angeles during the height of the Crips and the Bloods gangs and whatnot. We were making 2 or 3 felony arrests a day.
Good grief.
And, you know, when you do that, you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with these people, and I would always try to talk to them, engage them. Why are you dealing drugs? Why are you out robbing liquor stores? Why are you? And I would hear all these stories after story after story.
I'm like this because.
I'm like this because, exactly. And what I realized was that everything after because is just an excuse.
Your whole book is about those who have a victor mentality and those who have the victim mentality. Define, as you do in the book for us now, what those two things are.
Well, what happened was as I got successful in business and I started to hear people's excuses in business and in the church, hear people's excuses in the church, I started realizing they were all the same excuses. Yeah. And so from victims, they just don't want to make choices. So they refuse to make a choice and they want somebody else to be accountable for their life. Victors make choices. They understand my life is what the choices that I make, and I'm accountable for those choices.
You say in the book that victims will not change. Instead, the future of America depends on the reaction of the victors. Talk about that.
Victims can suck away an amazing amount of time from people. And I think Satan is always out there deceiving and always throwing people in our way to keep us from the mission that we're on. And so we've got to understand as Christians, we're going to go to the cross no matter what. We're going to go after Jesus, and if people stumble, if they fall, we're going to help them, we're going to pick them up. But if they want to sit down and not make choices, then we've got to keep going.
One of the things that defines a victim from a victor is their communication style. You talk about 4 of them. Go through those.
Yeah, well, it's huge. So as our business was struggling, a business coach, John Cundiff, came to me and taught me these 4 things, which were amazing. And they
I thought your phone conversation with him was
Yeah,
amazing. I don't know
that?
if I would have had the courage to answer yes to. What did he say to you? Are you
you
willing
have
to
what
be?
it takes to be a ruthless leader.
Yeah, oof,
Yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah. And I didn't know how to answer that question. And what he basically taught me is it's not personality styles, it's how people think, how they approach life. And so one group of people loves to be pithy, straight to the point, not a lot of fluff. That's my style. My wife's style is one called an authority. They like details. They like to analyze things, and they don't like change. They want security. So if I communicate with my wife, I need to communicate in a way that she can understand, which is she wants all the detail. Let's have a long conversation. If she communicates with me, I'm thinking, let's get to the point. It's helpful then, in business and life, if we understand each person's communication style, how they see things. So I told you 2 of them. The third is a very non-confrontational, we call it power. These are people that want, let's get it buy-in from everybody. Let's make sure everybody agrees before we go. And the last style is people who are very focused on freedom. Everything they do is about my own freedom. How am I going to make my choices, and don't put me into a box? When we understand who we're talking to and we understand where we come from, it's great. So I can realize that I can sometimes be overly blunt with people, and to some people that's offensive. To people who are my own style, well, that's refreshing. Oh, this guy just
They
got
like knowing where you stand.
Exactly.
It's really interesting because even the power definition wasn't what you would think power would be. I mean, you'd think power would be, I said it, and so we're going to do it.
Right.
But this is the consensus person.
Right.
I mean, these are so unusual. How did this change the way you ran your business? You got out of the police officer role you were in. You had a company of your own. How did it change? Your company's very successful. How did this change the way you did business?
Well, I was able to talk to people in a way that they could hear me. So, for instance, if I'm talking to a control personality and I say something they don't like, they're going to let me know right away. Well, I disagree. They're going to be confrontational. If I'm talking to a power personality, they're not going to let me know. They're going to be more passive aggressive. So if I offend a power, they're going to go and they're not going to tell me, they're going to tell everybody else. So when you know who you're talking to, I realize, okay, if I talk to a control and they didn't say anything back to me, we're having a good conversation. If I'm talking to a power and they're not, well, they may not have really gotten, so there's body cues that you get, and it helps not just in business, but in marriage, in raising your kids. I mean, how I've raised my kids has been dramatic. My ability to communicate to my children and know where they're coming from back by knowing how they communicate.
Is that style that you're talking about just a part of each person's personality, or how do we become one of the 4?
Yeah. I'd say you're born that way. And,
really?
There's definite there's ways that you go positive or negative. And so, for instance, taking a control like me, I know I'm in a bad spot because controls default, so their positive virtue is wisdom. Controls tend to see the bigger picture and have wisdom. The default is anger. So I know I'm in a bad spot. When I get angry and frustrated at people and go, what's wrong with these people? I know, okay, I need to stop.
Just take a step back.
And each style has little keys that say, if I'm going there, so for power, it's frustration. So there we go.
Ken, I see so many young people, because I do a lot of work with children who are orphaned or vulnerable, who have that victim mentality. It's a common thing, especially for someone who's been institutionalized. Can we change that? If you've got a victim mentality, how do you become a victor?
You got to get rid of fear.
Yeah.
Fear is what keeps people from taking it. I mean, you've seen that, right? And we also have to let people know you haven't made a choice. I mean, the difference between a victim and a victor is choice. You make a choice, but you haven't made a choice until you've made action on that choice. It's the same as faith is. Faith is action. It's not good feelings. It's not, I haven't made a choice to do something until I've actually experienced the pain of making my choice.
Yeah. And all choice has some element of pain
in
it.
And
but
risk.
it's also the gain.
That's exactly right.
It's an amazing book, and I want to tell you, it will change your relationships with people, whether it's in your business, with your spouse, with your children, your neighbors. It's all there. You really need to read it. Victors and Victims. I couldn't put it down. It's excellent. It's available wherever books are sold. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Fascinating. Great to have you here. Well, still ahead, another round of Bring It On. Here's one question from Megan. My old church has a new rule that states if you've been divorced, you can't be a member. Is this fair? Well, we're going to let Pat tackle that and more when we return.
To see this week's top on-demand videos, go to CBN.com.
Well, it's time to bring it on with your email questions. And Pat, this first one is from a viewer who says, Pat, I have a $500,000 whole life insurance policy that accumulates cash value over the years. But so many people are not supportive of the high amount of the policy when a lowered priced policy would protect me just as well and the premium would be less too. What's your advice?
I think whole life is one of the most awful investments that's ever been conceived of by greedy people.
How do you really feel?
I mean, it really is awful. You know, the best way to go, you know, if you want to have an investment portfolio, we'll put some of the money into mutual funds or something like that and buy term life. And again, who are you protecting? I mean, life insurance is for something, but if your spouse is taken care of and if your children are grown, you might not need $500,000 of life insurance, and you might find that you can save some money. But or if you need the protection, the coverage, go for a good level term policy and take the balance of what you've been putting into that, quote, whole life. You see, here's the deal, and you know it borders on fraud, but the insurance companies are huge that they'll probably sue me for saying this. But you buy insurance, okay? Theoretically, when you die, you're supposed to be able to collect the insurance, at least your heirs are. But with that whole life thing, they say, well, you're building up an annuity. The only thing is when you die, they keep the annuity and they pay off on the term. And so all that money you've saved up goes to the insurance company. Yeah. Unless you've got a provision in there where it goes to you, and that they're writing them a little bit more benignly than they used to. But you asked me about it. Bailout. All right, okay. What else?
This is Megan who says, Dear Pat, I recently found out that a church I used to attend has a new rule. This church has been around since the 1920s, but the new pastor, who was hired around 5 years ago, has made it a rule that if you've been divorced, you cannot be a member of the church. This new rule also applies to current members, so some of the congregation, including members who've been attending this church for many years, have had their memberships revoked. Is that fair?
A friend of mine wrote a book once called Divorce, the Unpardonable Sin. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's grounds for divorce. There are all kinds of reasons people are divorced. Their spouse abandons them. The Bible says it's a Pauline privilege. The unbelieving spouse is pleased to depart, let them depart. Well, when they depart, the brother or sister is not bound in that case. That's what the Bible says. So you've got a spouse that deserts you, you have a right to get a divorce. This guy who's running your church is a legalist. I would recommend you fire him as fast as you can. And if you can't fire him, I recommend you find another church.
Sell him a whole life policy.
Yeah, and take your whole life policy with you. Give that to the pastor. All right. What else?
Okay. This is Gail who says, I've been teaching at my church for 4 years. One of the young adults sexually assaulted my daughter. I went to the Sunday school director and preacher and told them what happened. The preacher wanted to talk to my daughter, so I sent her. And she poured out her heart to him. They told us they would get back to us, but they never did. Our preacher let us down. My daughter has always been raised in church, and she loves God dearly. But now we aren't going to any church because she doesn't want to go. We're stuck because she doesn't trust the church anymore. What should we do?
What a mess. You didn't say how old she was. If she's under 16, for example, or under 8, depending on the law, that's statutory rape. And if somebody actually had sex with her, that boy has committed a crime, a crime, the kind that says go to jail. And I recommend that this is a crime that should be brought before the authorities. Mm-hmm. Now, if your daughter is 18 and she got molested, but she didn't say, did the guy have sex with her or did he just make an appropriate gesture? You don't know. You say he was molested. I don't know what happened to her. But the whole deal is the church should have dealt with that matter, and they haven't. And you know, the other thing you have is to bring it to the congregation, have a congregational meeting, say, I want to bring a charge. But that's so unpleasant. And maybe the best thing to do is to say, you know, I'm walking out of here There are many churches that preach the gospel. Go find one and join it.
But on the other hand, if they don't call this person to accountability, then every young woman who is in, that church
that's what happened to the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has been sued over and over again. There've been all kinds of lawsuits against them. There've been judgments against them. Some of them, there's a bishop recently that was convicted because he didn't take action in relation to errant priests. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And this is an evil that has to be stopped out. But you didn't give me enough information to tell you exactly what the story was. But if it was all the way to sexual intercourse and there's a young underage person, big deal. Well, we leave you with today's Power Minute from Proverbs 16. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. For Terry and me, this is Pat Robertson. Thank you for being with us. Tomorrow, the Christian mom who was thrown into a Sudanese prison is going to share the chilling details behind her harrowing ordeal on tomorrow's 700 Club. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.